I wasn't even snooping. That's the worst part. I wasn't digging, searching for proof of some betrayal like some paranoid husband who couldn't handle his wife's coldness. No, I had accepted it. The distance. The way Jennifer would flinch when I brushed against her in bed. The nights she spent at the gym, coming home late with her hair still damp from the shower, avoiding my touch as if it burned. I had swallowed every excuse, every dismissive, "I'm just tired," or "I think I'm getting sick," until it all became white noise. I had made peace with the fact that my wife had checked out of our marriage a long time ago. And then, one evening, I opened an old laptop. It was a spare, one she hadn't used in years, at least that's what I thought. I needed a file, something I'd saved ages ago. I didn't expect to find anything unusual. But the moment I opened the browser, I noticed it. A tab still open, buried beneath others. Payment confirmation. My eyes skimmed the words automatically. Fertility clinic payment processed. The date caught me first. 3 weeks ago. And another one before that. And another. 8 months worth of transactions, neatly lined up in her email. Recurring payments to a clinic I didn't even know she was visiting. Something heavy settled in my chest. Something thick and suffocating. I clicked through them one by one, each confirmation another nail in the coffin of my understanding. 8 months. 8 months of payments. 8 months of silence. 8 months where she recoiled from my touch as if I were poison. My fingers gripped the laptop so tightly my knuckles turned white. My stomach clenched, my pulse hammering behind my eyes. I forced myself to breathe, to focus, but a thought had already rooted itself so deeply into my brain that it burned. She didn't want me, but she still wanted a child. My child? A different child? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My mind raced through every moment in the past year, every strained conversation, every time she'd pulled away when I tried to hold her, when I tried to kiss her. The way she'd always had an excuse. It had been so consistent, almost scheduled. And now I knew why. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the glow of the alarm clock carving deep red slashes into the darkness. 2:43 a.m. 3:10 a.m. 4:21 a.m. The numbers blurred together, but the thoughts didn't. They just sharpened, over and over, like a knife against a whetstone. I kept running through it, every payment, every timeline. The first one had been 8 months ago, right around the time she stopped letting me touch her. Right around the time she became too tired, too stressed, too busy. Right around the time she started locking her phone, keeping her laptop close, erasing her search history. The weight of it sat on my chest like an anvil. By the time the sun cracked over the horizon, I knew I wouldn't find peace until I found answers. Jennifer's routine was as predictable as a metronome. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, she was at the gym by 6, home by 8, showered and out the door by 9. She never deviated. She never noticed when I did. That morning, I waited until she left. Then I walked into the laundry room, straight to the corner where she always dropped her gym bag. The moment I picked it up, I knew something was wrong. It was too heavy. Not impossibly so, but just wrong. I unzipped it, expecting the usual water bottle, towel, protein bars, maybe some extra clothes. Instead, my fingers brushed against something hard, metallic, and freezing to the touch. I frowned and pulled it out. The thermos. Stainless steel, heavy, the kind designed to keep liquids hot or cold for an ungodly amount of time. But this wasn't for coffee. I knew that the second I saw the label. Cryobank. The logo was small, stamped in neat blue letters along the side. Beneath it, in finer print, a barcode, a date, and 2 letters that made my stomach drop through the floor. For F. For a long moment, I just stood there, gripping the thermos so tightly my fingers ached. The air around me seemed to thin, as if the entire house had been drained of oxygen. I felt cold, not just from the metal pressing against my palm, but from the weight of realization settling over me like a lead blanket. Jennifer had been making payments to a fertility clinic for 8 months. She had been keeping her body at a careful, calculated distance for 8 months. And now, in her gym bag, she had a cryogenic storage container from a facility that specialized in frozen reproductive material. A horrible, sickening clarity hit me all at once. This wasn't someone else's. This wasn't random. This was mine. Jennifer and I had tried to conceive years ago. We'd gone through rounds of tests, procedures, and at one point, A specialist had recommended we freeze some samples for later use, just in case. It had seemed like a practical decision at the time, a precaution we might never need. And when things got hard, when the failed attempts piled up, when the hope curdled into disappointment, we let it go. We stopped trying, stopped talking about it. Or at least I thought we had. But Jennifer hadn't let it go. She'd gone behind my back. She had stolen from me. The realization sent a fresh wave of nausea rolling through me. I felt unsteady, off-kilter, as if the ground had tilted beneath my feet. I wanted to believe there was another explanation, some reasonable justification. But deep down, I knew there wasn't. I set the thermos down carefully, as if it might detonate, and stared at it. She had taken what was mine. And now I needed to know why. I wasn't the kind of man who broke things in anger. I didn't scream. I didn't punch walls. I had never been that man. But as I sat there, staring at that cryobank thermos on the kitchen table, I understood the impulse. The raw, animalistic need to destroy, to lash out, to make something suffer the way I was suffering. Instead, I did what I always did. I buried it. I swallowed the rage down deep, let it calcify into something sharper, controlled, calculated, deadly. Jennifer wasn't just lying. She wasn't just sneaking around. She had committed an act of theft. And if she had gone this far, I needed to know how deep the rot went. I grabbed my laptop and started with the easiest step. Her email. I knew her usual passwords, but Jennifer wasn't stupid. She'd changed them at some point, probably when she started making her secret payments. What she hadn't changed, though, was her cloud storage settings. Her phone automatically backed up to the same account we had shared years ago. And while she might have thought she was careful, I knew Jennifer. She was meticulous about details, but details could be exploited. It took less than 10 minutes before I was inside. At first, I found nothing out of the ordinary. Photos, random work documents, old tax forms. But then, buried deep in a folder labeled medical, I found a PDF. My heart pounded as I clicked it open. At the top, the official header of Westlake Fertility Institute. My breath went shallow. And beneath that, the words that made my vision blur with rage. Informed consent for assisted reproductive procedures. My name was there, William Carter, typed neatly into the forms. My supposed signature at the bottom. Digital. Legally binding. I stared at it, my pulse hammering in my ears. She had forged my consent. I read through the fine print, my hands cold and steady, my mind a razor. The document authorized the clinic to proceed with fertilization and embryo implantation using previously stored reproductive material. It granted full medical decision-making authority to Jennifer Carter. It was dated 5 months ago. 5 months. That was when the payments had doubled. That was when she had started coming home even later from her so-called gym nights. That was when, I realized with sickening clarity, she had started actively trying to get pregnant. Without me. The betrayal was so vast, so calculated, that it didn't even feel real. This wasn't a drunken mistake. This wasn't an affair driven by impulse. This was premeditated. Jennifer had made a choice. She had wanted a child, but not with me. Not with the man she shared a life with. No, she had wanted my genetic material, my DNA, but without my say. Without my touch. She had cut me out of the equation. And that was when the rage solidified into something else. Something cold. Something precise. Something that would make her regret every single step of this betrayal. That night I waited. Jennifer came home late as usual. She smelled like lavender shampoo and exhaustion. Her damp hair curling at the ends as she moved around the kitchen with effortless familiarity. Like she wasn't actively committing the most profound betrayal of my life. I watched her from the doorway, studying every movement, every little habit I had once found endearing. The way she chewed the inside of her cheek when she was distracted. The way she stretched her fingers absent-mindedly after setting something down. The way she never looked me in the eye anymore. Tonight I would change that. "Hey!" I said casually, stepping into the room. She startled slightly just for a second, but covered it with a smile. "Hey, you're still up." I let out a soft chuckle. Couldn't sleep, thinking about some things. She nodded, busying herself with pouring a glass of water, her shoulders tense. She felt me watching her. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her nervous before I finally spoke again. "I think we should try again," She froze mid-pour. The faintest tremor ran through her fingers before she carefully set the glass down and turned to face me. Try again. For a baby. I kept my voice steady, my face unreadable. I know things have been hard between us. I know I haven't been the most supportive husband lately, but I've been thinking a lot, and I don't want to lose what we had. Her eyes flickered, a storm of emotions behind them. Shock, guilt, something else I couldn't quite place. William, I didn't think you still wanted that. I took a slow step toward her, reaching out, running my fingers lightly down her arm. She didn't pull away. Not this time. I do, I said softly. I really do. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head, calculating, adjusting. Was this an opportunity? A trap? Did I know anything? She bit her lip, then nodded. I want that too. Liar. I smiled, pulling her into a hug. Her body was stiff at first, then relaxed. I kissed the top of her head. Then let's do it right this time. A beat. Then she pulled back just enough to look up at me. Right? I nodded. You've been doing all of this alone, haven't you? I brushed a strand of hair from her face, studying her. The clinic, the appointments. You don't have to do that anymore. We'll do it together. Something flickered in her expression, relief, maybe? A guilty kind of gratitude? She exhaled softly. That would mean a lot, Will. I want to be involved. I want to help. And I want to make sure you're healthy. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a small bottle. So I picked these up today. She glanced at it. Vitamins? I nodded. Prenatal. The best ones. Just to prepare your body. Make sure you're getting everything you need before implantation. She took the bottle, turning it over in her hands. If she had been paying real attention, she might have noticed something was off. The label looked professional, sure. The branding was slick, the instructions perfectly standard. But the contents? Not prenatal vitamins. A harmless mix of slow-acting inhibitors. Nothing dangerous. Nothing permanent. Just enough to ensure that no embryo would take. A delay. A little more time. Time I would use to rip everything out from under her. Jennifer smiled softly, pressing the bottle to her chest. This means so much to me. I smiled back. I know. The next morning I made a call. Not to the clinic. Not to Jennifer. No, I had bigger fish to fry. I needed a lawyer. But not just any lawyer. I needed someone who could dig without leaving footprints. Someone who could get me answers without alerting my dear wife that I was already 20 steps ahead of her. So I reached out to an old acquaintance, a corporate shark who owed me a favor. We weren't exactly friends, but money has a way of making alliances convenient. By lunchtime, I had my answer. Jennifer had transferred the house into her name 6 weeks ago. No warning, no discussion, no signature from me. Just a neat little paper trail leading to a legal loophole that allowed her to restructure assets, without my consent. Thanks to a clause I hadn't even noticed when we refinanced 2 years ago. She had set it up perfectly. She wasn't just preparing to have a child without me. She was preparing to leave me entirely. I stared at the documents, my mind sharp and silent. No rage, no panic, just clarity. Jennifer wasn't just planning a future without me. She was securing every possible advantage before she walked away. The house, the finances, the narrative. In her version of events, I would be the bitter, resentful husband who didn't want kids. The emotionally distant man who forced her to take matters into her own hands. And when the time came, when she was ready to play the victim, she would have everything neatly arranged, right down to the roof over her head. Smart, but not smart enough. That night, I poured us both a glass of wine. Jennifer sat across from me at the dining table, relaxed in a way she hadn't been in months. I had been so supportive lately, so understanding. She thought I was finally stepping into the role of the husband she needed. She had no idea I was already dismantling the life she had so carefully built behind my back. So, I said, swirling the wine in my glass, I've been thinking a lot about the future. She smiled, sipping her drink. Yeah, I nodded. About us. About our family. I let the words sit between us, heavy with meaning. And I just want to say, I really admire you, Jen. Her smile faltered slightly. You do. Absolutely. I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough to make it intimate. The way you plan. The way you think ahead. You've always had such strong instincts. I chuckled. I mean, taking care of everything, even the house. There. That tiny, almost imperceptible stiffening of her spine. The slight shift of her expression. I tilted my head. Oh, did I surprise you? Jennifer set her glass down, her fingers carefully poised around the stem. What do you mean? I mean, you're incredible. I let my voice drop into something warm. Most women would feel guilty, making such a huge decision alone. But not you. You're always one step ahead. She let out a small laugh, but there was something forced in it. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. I smiled. 6 weeks ago. The deed transfer. Silence. Jennifer's face smoothed into something unreadable, something careful. I was just making sure everything was in order. Of course, I agreed. Maternal instincts and all that. I took another sip of wine. After all, you wouldn't want any surprises. A long pause. She nodded slowly, watching me, assessing, calculating whether I knew everything. I let her wonder, because she had no idea I had already started the process of selling the house out from under her. Selling the house was easier than I thought. Jennifer had done most of the work for me. She had already transferred the deed into her name, leaving me off the paperwork entirely. A move she thought would secure her future, give her control. But all it really did was make it easier for me to make the whole damn thing disappear without her ever knowing. I knew better than to handle it directly, so I set up a shell company. Nothing flashy, just another nameless offshore firm in the British Virgin Islands, one of thousands, indistinguishable from the rest. The kind designed to move money without leaving fingerprints. The kind that made financial ghosts. Through a carefully woven web of anonymous transactions, the firm purchased the house at market value. The sale processed legally. The documents were all there, signed and sealed, including Jennifer's signature, or rather, the perfectly replicated digital version of it. She had no idea how much she had taught me over the years. All those nights she spent working late, reviewing contracts, approving deals. I had watched, I had listened, and when the time came, I knew exactly how to pull off a little paperwork magic of my own. By the time the funds cleared, the money was clean. $740,000. Transferred from our home, Jennifer's security, her exit plan, straight into a charitable foundation. A fertility foundation, to be precise. One I had personally set up under her name. Jennifer Carter, lifetime benefactor of Westlake Fertility Fund. A woman so selfless, so generous, that she had donated her entire estate to help struggling couples afford IVF. Her name would be etched onto donor plaques, framed on office walls, tied forever to an institution she had secretly funneled my DNA into. The poetry of it nearly brought a tear to my eye. By the time Jennifer realized what had happened, there would be no reversing it. No lawsuit could undo philanthropy. No bank could claw back a gift. The money was gone. The house was gone. And all that was left was her name, immortalized in a way she could never erase. I wanted her to see it. Not just the missing house. Not just the empty bank accounts. No, that would be too simple. Too predictable. Jennifer needed to feel what I felt. She needed to watch as her carefully constructed reality collapsed in front of her. So I gave her an audience. It started with a simple phone call. A journalist, entirely fabricated, of course, reaching out to Westlake Fertility Institute. A request for an interview about their most notable benefactor. Oh, Mrs. Carter? Yes, of course. The clinic director had no idea what was coming. The whole thing was so easy. A few well-placed emails. Polished press release. And within days, an entire media event was in motion, celebrating the extraordinary generosity of a woman who had just selflessly donated her entire estate to help struggling couples afford their dream of parenthood. The clinic ate it up. They arranged everything. A small, tasteful event in the lobby. A gathering of doctors, nurses, and grateful families. A camera crew to document the moment. The final touch. A plaque. The Jennifer Carter Fertility Grant. A name that would live on forever. I watched the video feed live from my phone as the ceremony played out. The clinic's director gave a heartfelt speech about Jennifer's unparalleled generosity. Couples, hand-selected actors I had paid handsomely, tearfully thanked her for her kindness. A woman, 5 months pregnant thanks to the Carter grant. Wiped her eyes. Without you, Jennifer, I wouldn't be holding my miracle baby. The audience applauded. And then, the final reveal. The director pulled the cloth off the newly mounted plaque in the clinic's main hall. In loving generosity, the Jennifer Carter Fertility Grant, ensuring parenthood for all. She couldn't erase it. She couldn't undo it. No amount of screaming, crying, or legal action could erase her legacy now. By the time she saw it, it would be too late. Jennifer was glowing. She practically floated around the house, riding the high of her imminent motherhood. The same woman who had flinched at my touch, who had spent a year treating me like an unwanted guest in my own marriage, was suddenly radiant. It was disgusting. She thought she had won, that everything was falling into place. She had secured the house, or so she thought. She had gotten what she needed from me, or so she believed. And now, her body was prepared for the final step, the embryo transfer. She was even affectionate again. Little touches, soft smiles, lingering glances. It was hilarious. "Can you grab my supplements?" she asked one morning, stretching lazily across the bed, basking in the warmth of the sunlight like a cat that had finally caught the mouse. "Of course," I said, supportive, loving, the perfect husband. I walked into the kitchen, opened the cabinet where she kept her prenatal meds and hormone stabilizers, and did exactly what I had been doing for weeks. I swapped them out. It had been too easy. I had started small, replacing the estrogen pills with identical-looking sugar tablets, swapping out the progesterone injections with sterile saline. Her body was being primed for implantation. Every hormone, every supplement, every carefully measured dose was meant to prepare the perfect environment for the embryo. And I was slowly, methodically undoing all of it. I handed her the bottle, watching as she unscrewed the lid and tossed 2 pills into her mouth without a second thought. I smiled as she swallowed. She smiled back, oblivious. 2 more weeks, Jen. That's all it would take. 2 more weeks and her perfectly scheduled transfer would fail. And then the real fun would begin. Her panic, her confusion, the desperation when the doctors would tell her something was wrong. And through all of it, I would be there, holding her, comforting her, pretending to be devastated, pretending just like she had. It was time to end it. Jennifer had been floating on her little cloud of delusion for too long, convinced that fate was on her side, that everything was aligning perfectly for her miracle baby. She had no idea that every step she took was a step I had already accounted for. I let her hope. I let her dream. I let her believe that her plan was still intact. And then, just days before her scheduled transfer, I shattered it. The email was simple, direct, just enough detail to be impossible to ignore. Subject: Urgent Ethical Violation Report, Westlake Fertility Institute. To whom it may concern. This is a formal complaint regarding a serious breach of medical ethics involving a patient currently receiving treatment at your facility. The individual in question, Jennifer Carter, has been undergoing IVF procedures using fraudulent consent documents to authorize the use of reproductive material without spousal approval. Attached, you will find a forged consent form containing a falsified digital signature, as well as financial transaction records indicating a pattern of deception over the past 8 months. Given the legal and ethical implications, I urge you to conduct an immediate review of her case before proceeding with any further treatments. Sincerely, a concerned party. I attached the PDF, the very same one I had found in her cloud. I even made a few enhancements to ensure it looked sufficiently damning. Highlighted inconsistencies, metadata details that raised questions. Then, with the click of a button, I sent it. And just like that, her world collapsed. I was in the kitchen when she got the call. I heard the phone ring from the other room, heard the shift in her voice, from casual to confused to something dangerously close to hysteria. "What do you mean my case is under review?" she snapped. A pause. Then, that's impossible. My husband signed the forms. I have proof." She was pacing now, her voice rising. "No, you don't understand. I've been a patient here for almost a year. You can't just..." Another silence. Longer this time. Then, in a small, strangled voice, "What do you mean I've been disqualified?" I took a sip of my coffee, staring out the window as she cracked. The clinic had banned her. Permanently. Her case was now flagged for legal review. Any attempt to seek treatment elsewhere would require a full investigation. Jennifer Carter, once the clinic's most promising patient, its most generous benefactor, was now a walking scandal. She staggered into the kitchen, her face ashen. "Will," she whispered, her hands shaking. Something's wrong." I set my mug down and turned to her with perfect concern. "What do you mean?" I asked softly. They won't treat me." Her eyes were wild, searching mine for answers. "They said something about my consent forms being flagged, about legal violations. They won't tell me anything else." I frowned, tilted my head. "That's really strange." She swallowed hard. You didn't." Her voice broke off. The question hung in the air, unspoken. I took a step closer, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Jen," I said, my voice thick with manufactured sympathy. "Why would I ever do something like that?" She let out a shuddering breath, nodding, convincing herself that I was still on her side, that I was still the fool she had taken me for. She didn't realize I had personally signed the death certificate of her entire future. Our anniversary arrived with an eerie kind of stillness. Jennifer had been a ghost for days, floating through the house in stunned silence. She barely ate, barely spoke. The woman who had once meticulously planned every detail of her future was now unraveling in real time. Caught in the wreckage of a dream she no longer understood. Her IVF cycle was dead. Her fertility clinic had blacklisted her. She had called lawyers, demanded explanations, but there was nothing left to fix. She had been erased from the system. And yet, despite it all, she still clung to the illusion that her life wasn't completely falling apart. That maybe, just maybe, we could salvage something. So she pretended. She got dressed that morning, put on makeup, smiled like she wasn't being hollowed out from the inside. "It's our anniversary," she said weakly, forcing a brightness into her voice that made my skin crawl. I smiled back. I didn't forget. Her shoulders relaxed just slightly. She needed to believe I was still blind to everything, that I hadn't noticed her deception, that we could go back to the way things were. "I actually have something for you," I said. "A surprise." Her lips parted in surprise. "You do." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. Jennifer hesitated, then picked it up with careful fingers. She peeled it open, pulling out the thick sheet of cardstock inside. Her eyes flicked over the words, and then she froze. I watched the color drain from her face, her fingers trembling as she reread it. The Jennifer Carter Lifetime Donor Award. In recognition of her extraordinary generosity, Jennifer Carter has been honored as a perpetual benefactor to Westlake Fertility Institute's donation program. Her name will remain as a guiding light for all those who dream of parenthood. Her breath came out in short, shallow gasps. "What?" Her voice caught. "What is this?" I leaned in, lowering my voice to a whisper. "Now you're a mother to all of them." She jerked her head up, eyes wide, lips parted, but no words came out. I tilted my head, studying her like a specimen under glass. "You always wanted to help people, didn't you?" My voice was soft, mocking. "That's why you donated so much money to the clinic. That's why you went behind my back to create life." I smiled. "Well, now you'll be helping forever." Her hands clenched around the certificate, crumpling the edges. Her breathing was erratic, her chest rising and falling in uneven bursts. "Will," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What did you do?" I sat back in my chair, stretching my arms casually. "I just made sure your generosity wasn't wasted." She shook her head, her pupils blown wide with panic. "This isn't real." "Oh, it's very real." I gestured toward the plaque unveiling video I had saved on my phone. "Your name is permanently attached to the largest donor fund in their history. Every time a couple walks into that clinic, they'll see it." I leaned in again, my voice dropping into something dark and final. "Your name will live forever in every child created there." Jennifer made a strangled noise, her body shaking. For the first time in our entire marriage, she understood what it felt like to have no control. And it was beautiful. Jennifer didn't sleep that night. She sat curled on the couch, gripping that damn certificate like a death warrant, her eyes red and hollow. Every few hours, she checked her phone, refreshing her email, waiting for a response from her lawyers, the clinic, anyone who could undo what had been done. But there was nothing to undo. It was permanent. Her name would live in that clinic forever. She didn't go to work the next day. She didn't eat. She barely moved. And when she finally did, it was only to retreat to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I let her have her moment, because I wasn't finished yet. That evening, while Jennifer stewed in her own helplessness, I sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and emptied every last cent she had. It wasn't hard. I had access to everything. She had made sure of that early in our marriage, trusting me with passwords, joint accounts, investment portfolios. She had even given me power of attorney once, back when she still saw me as a partner. She had been planning her escape for months. Too bad I had been planning mine better. I liquidated her savings, sold off her stocks, every single penny, and then, with a few clicks, I transferred it all. The final donation, her grand legacy. Jennifer Carter, the woman who stole my DNA, who tried to erase me from my own child's conception, was now the single largest financial supporter of the very clinic that destroyed her. It was poetic. It was perfect. And it wasn't until morning that she realized she had nothing left. I was in the kitchen, sipping my coffee, when the first scream tore through the house. Then another. Then the frantic pounding of her footsteps as she ran toward me, her phone clutched in a shaking hand. Will! Her voice was raw, high-pitched. Where is it? Where the hell is my money? I turned slowly, setting my mug down with a quiet clink. What do you mean? She shoved her phone in my face, the banking app pulled up. $0. Accounts closed. Funds transferred. I let my eyes widen in mock surprise. Wow! I murmured. That's a shame. Her lips parted, disbelief battling horror across her face. You didn't what? I tilted my head. Make sure your name would be truly unforgettable? She shook her head, breath hitching. No. This isn't happening. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single folded note, sliding it across the counter toward her. She stared at it like it might bite. With trembling fingers, she opened it. The handwriting was neat, precise. Thank you for the idea. Now your name will live in every one of their lives. Jennifer made a sound, a broken, guttural noise I had never heard before. She stumbled back, her legs buckling, her entire body shaking. I leaned in, my voice calm. Final. They'll never forget you, Jen. Her breath hitched. And neither will I. And then I walked away,